and welcome. I hope this finds you well wherever you are. My name is Hala, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the reciprocal relationship between community music research and practice. In the next 20 minutes or so, you'll be learning about the research that I've conducted, about the performances that I did as part of my research. Then I'm going to hone down the presentation, examining the relationship between the research and the practice. So starting off, who am I and what do I do? So again, my name is Hala Jaber. I come from a small town called Beit Sahur in Palestine in the Middle East. I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, an auntie, and perhaps an annoying person to somebody. I'm also a classically trained flute player, a community musician, and aspiring researcher. Now at this point you might be going, really Hala, why is this relevant to us in any ways? It is a little bit relevant, and I'm going to invite you to bear with me until perhaps the end of this presentation to clarify how is this relevant. But to give you a little teaser, here's a quote that I really like. In situating the self, the researcher exposes the selves and observes as it guides them to a place they never thought possible. Understanding the positionality of the self is essential to the research query. I will invite you to kind of switch the words a little bit, and instead of having the research query, you can put the practice. So understanding the positionality of the self is essential to our practice. And another invitation, understanding the positionality of the self is essential to the relationship between our research and practice, and more on that later on. To start off, the research. So I conducted a PhD research titled An Arts Practice Investigation of Community Music Intervention in the context of post-conflict migration with special reference to the Syrian community in Ireland. I had one main question, which was, based on community music principles, what are the most useful music interventions for people living in the context of post-conflict migration? And two sub-questions. While working with the Syrian community in Ireland, which aspects of the developed methods are transferable to other groups experiencing trauma and displacement? And how can developing this music program help me gain a deeper understanding of my practice and develop my skills as a community musician? And as you can note, this question is in bold because this is the lens that I'm using to conduct this presentation today. In much more simpler, easier words, what I was trying to do is I was working with refugees, asylum seekers, and newcomers, conducting community music workshops, trying to understand the potential found in music to kind of promote integration between people. And I wanted to develop a method or an approach that can help other community musicians, as well as myself, when working with migrants and refugees. How did I do that? So my methodological approaches were arts practice, and my practice of community music was my main resource of collecting data, which means conducting workshops with people was the way that I learned. Autoethnography, I wanted to understand the impact of past experiences of conflict on my practice of community music, and I also wanted to track and document the development of my practice and the changes occurring on my approach of facilitation. I also used narrative inquiry, and I used it to understand people's cultures, dispositions, stories of past and present, and the way they engage with music. Ethnography, to understand participants' opinions and observations of the workshops, to gain various perspectives on the community music practice from different practitioners and integration workers, and to comprehend the audience's understanding of what is presented in the performances. And arts-based methods, I use that to provide the research with various artistic approaches that complement the music making and to offer the participants way to self-express beyond the music making. So I had my questions, I had my methods, and off I went investigating with the performances. So I started off with a first performance called The Journey from Within, and that performance examined the stories that both myself and the group that I was working with brought from our land of conflict to Ireland. So in order to prepare and do this performance, I started by researching. And what I mean by that is I started reading literature of community music, of trauma, of migration, of culture. I started kind of coming up with a data collection plan of how am I going to understand my practice, how am I going to collect data. And then I did a lot of ethical consideration, because in community music we always do ethics and we always want to keep our safe space for the group we're working with. However, when working with refugees who might have a traumatic past, who might have a traumatic experience prior to migrating, ethical considerations are doubled, they're layered more in terms of, will music re-traumatize them? Will music kind of be a trigger for a memory that might actually not help them have a positive experience during the workshop but have a negative experience, and what the reciprocal ideas around that is. And then I examined logistics, which were, where are the workshops are going to be held, what time, which day of the week, how are we going to invite people, how are we going to reach people. So that takes a little bit of time to get settled. Once that was settled and all, we started conducting a community music workshops from a group of people from Africa and from Syria. And so we were conducting it once a week for about an hour and a half, an hour of music making and half an hour of chit chat and having a little bit of tea. Now, after a while of conducting these community music workshops, we started to run into a little bit of challenges. Some of them are timetable changes. So people's timetables were changing, and legal status changes. In our case, we were very lucky that one of our participants actually got the refugee status. But with that, they were no longer bound to stay in Limerick or in the hostel outside of Limerick City. They were able to move, and thus they wanted to move to Dublin to be closer to friends and start their life again. And we kind of said goodbye to that participants. And then there were new needs of the participants emerging within. And all these challenges in my practice made me go back to point one, which is researching. I wanted to kind of look more into literature, talk and do interviews with other community musicians and see if they've come up with something similar and if they have what they have done to deal with it. Now, in the end, I had to follow what my participants wanted, and they wanted to perform and they wanted to keep doing music. So we made a new module of community music workshops that worked for us at that specific time. So we did one-on-one encounters, and with that I mean myself and another participant together conducting community music workshops. And then with that, because it was more of a private community of two, a slight shift of the needs was starting to emerge, and they were kind of a little bit more highlighting the social aspect of music making. Now, we conducted the performance, and then the themes emerging after analysing all the data were loss, migrant isolation, performative politics, and the community musician. Now, I had to be realistic and say what is within the perimeter of this research that I can investigate further and music can help with. And there were the migrant isolation, where I went up to my participants and said, you came and told you want more social aspects, yet the workshop as it is doesn't really work for us anymore. What do we do? And the majority of them said this, but I choose one quote that says, I'll tell you, we can meet once every month or fortnight. We tell all the people there will be food, very similar to what we once did in the cafe. We tell people about a certain day in the month. Each can make some food in their homes, and some will bring and others won't. Like a social celebration, all people will come together to talk and have fun, but it's not like a party. So with that, the idea of migrant isolation and the idea of a social event, I took those and started researching for the second performance that was From Within a Woman's Heart. Now, I took the data and I started analysing and investigating it further, which more highlighted that migrant isolation is true to the majority of refugees and asylum seekers. However, women of Middle Eastern regions are the ones who are pretty much having it the hardest. So we took that, the social event idea, and women, and we kind of started adapting my practice. So I started to adapt my practice to respond to the needs of the participants. And what do I mean by that? So I no longer held a community music workshop where we all kind of made music together, but I was preparing for a little social gathering that is driven by music. So here, I wasn't exactly a community musician in the traditional sense. I was more of a coordinator between groups, a coordinator to get a venue, to study the best possible layout of a social event. And then we started preparing for that performance or social event. And again, I did that by researching and talking to community organization about what's the best approach we can do that. I started by planning and talking to venues, where is the best venue, what time is the best to hold this event. And it worked with local and migrant women group around Limerick City. And we did hold the event, and it was a very successful event. And now I'm just going to show you a small clip of both the performances to give you a more in-depth idea. Bullets on the flight. No time to sleep tonight. For dear life, we must hold on tight. عيوني زغللة عم بتطلع بالمراية عيوني زغللة عم بتطلع بالمراية عيوني زغللة روح يمين ولا شمال من هالحال مو عرفان
تنفلوا لما العتم بيسافر بهاك المدى يا ريتهم ضلوا يا ريت يوصلوا النداء
ربما رحموني ورحموك قولي لهم ماذا جرى بروحي وقلبي قولي لهم كيف حطموا تلك الروح.
I hope you've enjoyed that. So we're going to come to the connection between the practice and the research. And in this kind, I'm going to move a little bit to the times of the first performance was I was deep in the research now. I discovered that this connection is me, you, the practitioner, the researcher. We are the connecting link between our practice and research. Let me explain this further. So I was there. I was reading the literature of community music, drama study, cultural studies, migration, music and emotion and all that. I was exploring and talking to different community music initiatives, organizations that work with refugees, and I was kind of exploring the needs of the refugees by asking them what are the musical needs, what do they want out of this musical program. And then on the other hand, I was actually running community music workshops for refugees and asylum seekers and facilitating sing-song music sessions with community music groups in Limerick. Now, they were not linked to my research, but they were part of my practice. And this was my face. I was a bit confused because I could read all that, explore all that, and I was doing that, and I couldn't find the bridge between the practice and the research. I couldn't understand how they merged together. And I needed a wake-up call, which luckily came by one of my participants sending me this image in a text message going, Hala the boss, or something along that lines. And that kind of halted me to realize that my research and practice were not really aligned or connected. I was missing the link, and I was unsure of how to reconnect with that link. Because I was reading all about the community musician who has to be open and welcoming and facilitating people and patient and nice. And I was being told that I was being bossy by my participants. So I had to take a step back and kind of realize what I was doing wrong. So what helped me start making that connection? Well, first, I started reflecting more deeply on the journal writings and asking deeper questions regarding my practice. And this is an excerpt of my own journals. Hala, why do we think we ran away? Those words caught me by surprise. Seeing 3 young men full of potential running away, being put in a hostel for an unknown time. They have bullet marks on their bodies and they have been tortured and bullied. They laugh and make jokes. This is how we deal with it. By laughing about it. How can someone laugh at being tortured? I realized there and then that I did not think why they ran away. I was focused on seeing them as humans only because this is how I wanted people to look at me. That I forgot. I neglected their pain. I didn't see where they came from, what they have been through, and the courage it took them to risk it all and leave. I don't think that was good community music practice. And what I mean by that is that we don't ask our participants their life stories before they come to our workshops. But sometimes when working with refugees and asylum seekers, we need to take a step back and ask, what kind of conflict have they run away from? What kind of war have they escaped? And what kind of consequences does that have on them, physically, emotionally, and mentally? And then I started questioning the meaning of literature in relation to my practice. And I don't mean questioning in a bad way. I just mean, for example, Higgins kind of explains the one-on-one encounters as being the initial encounter between the facilitator and the participants. Well, for me in my practice, the one-on-one encounters, they happen to be a full-on community music workshops. So I was reading literature in a more critical way to understand what does that mean to me and for my practice. I was also reflecting on the data collected from the performances and the meaning behind it. So this was from an interview I did with Laura Hostler. And I said, first of all, you are listening to what people want to do. You are respecting their passion, you are giving them ways to do that, and you are getting out of the way, and you are letting them raise their voice about what they think is important. You are giving them tools, basically. And I've done this interview throughout my first performance, and it kind of gave me the courage to say, right, I'm giving them tools, so I'm adapting my practice from being a full-on facilitator to a coordinator of a musical social event. And finally, I am still working on my facilitation style and presenting myself as the human I am. And this is a comment from one of the one of the audiences in the second performance. You, the facilitator, moved flawlessly from English and Arabic. You made people laugh, put them at their ease, and showed your own vulnerability when the lady made a joke about teaching a song about the sun and you were not sure whether you were actually being asked to teach it then and there or not. And in fact, showing vulnerability, that you are human too. And with that, I come to the end of the presentation, and I would like to invite you to consider the following. Consider the meaning of terminologies and concepts that you read about in literature to you and your group, because the concept of hospitality might mean something to a group in Ireland, but it means a total different thing to a group in Syria. I invite you to critically think about literature, and not in a negative way, but critically think about the situation that this article has been written in, and what can you learn from that, and what can you adapt from that into your practice. I invite you to deeply reflect on your personal approach and asking yourself hard questions. So if a workshop didn't go as it's supposed to, why? What was your role in not letting go as it's supposed to? And finally, linking back to one of the first slides, I like to invite you to acknowledge and try to place the number of roles you play and how they interlace and contrast within yourself. So try to understand all the hats that you're wearing all the time, because when you're conducting a community music session, you're still a mom, you're still a sister, you know. So if something is happening in that area, it's going to affect the other areas. And you might have been already there, but knowing who you are will help you kind of bridge between your research and practice. And I just want to say that I've been inspired about the identifying oneself from two articles that I've read, and they're listed in the reading list, which are Making a Mess of Everything, Exclusions Through Communities, Musics, Academics, Longing and Belonging. And the second was Yarning Up Stories of Challenges and Successes. And with that, I finally leave you with a suggested reading list with different headings. Thank you very much.